Jenny is known as the Bloggess. Her blog, the Bloggess, has won also a number of awards, and it receives 2 to 3 million page views per month. She has 220,000 followers on Twitter and has been described apparently by 3 people independently of one another as the funniest woman alive. So you'll have to have your own verdict on that in a moment. But
it's a good question. First of all, is my microphone on?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to take off my headphones because I'm hearing like 8,000 of me like reverberating in my head, and that's way too many voices. First of all, I think what makes a good blog versus a bad blog is editing. I personally will write 3 different posts and I will publish one of them because I do think you have to be careful about the things that you're kind of writing and putting out there, because they're not all going to be perfect. Also, you can kind of reread your own stuff and say, oh, do I really care that I ate a sandwich today and it tasted really good? No, I don't care. My mom probably wouldn't care. Probably the rest of the world doesn't care either. I wanted to go back to what we were talking about with trolls, because there is something that I do personally, and possibly unethical, but I still do it. First of all, if somebody writes something just incredibly stupid, like you're an idiot, and they spell you're wrong, I just leave it because that's funny. But if I have someone who is intentionally coming back because they are a true troll, someone who's just coming to get attention, what I'll do is I'll go in and I will change their comment from I hate you so much and you need to be forcibly sterilized to my God, I wish I could be more like you. And then what happens is they come back a few minutes later to see what how I responded and how I've been hurt, and they say, I never wrote that, I would never write that at all. I hate you and I think you should be hung, and I would change that to I wish I could wear your skin. And eventually they give up and they go away. So it's quite nice.
Good tactic. Well, I know that we're going to open this out to questions from you, and I know you'll have millions of them, but just before we do that, this very crucial thing that I've left till last, but is perhaps the first thing we should be thinking about, or at least it's not the first thing in one's writing life, but it does change it, which is the so-called pram in the hall. How does motherhood change your life, your writing? Does it make you a better writer? Does it make it more difficult? Both, Zoe, go ahead.
My boyfriend thought that was literally true. So
you didn't have a pram, you were all right.
No, he said he thought that was actually a scientific study. So we had the pram in the box, in its box before we had our first baby, and he said obviously it doesn't work when it's still in the box. I was like, fucking idiot. I suppose it makes you a bit more cautious. I've always had a problem with caution. I did an event last week and I tweeted, my mum is asleep, without realising that the tweets were going on the street. So everybody was looking and see a sleeping old woman, which of course they did see. So I've always had a problem with thinking things through. And that didn't change with having kids. I didn't think, oh, I really should think about this, I really should think about what they're going to think when they read it when they're older, which of course I think now, and they are older, they can't read, thankfully, but one day, presumably, they will be able to. By that point, hopefully they'll be interested in what I think about anything. I suppose the thing is that it kind of makes you more cautious in the kind of honesty, in the area of being honest about your feelings, because you can't really say you're ambivalent about anything in relation to kind of parenthood, if they're going to read it.
In relation to other things.
Well, yeah, in relation to everything else, I would never self-censor on kind of politically for the sake of the kids, even though I sometimes do think, like whenever I do something about abortion, because there's such a huge and personal kind of venom, I do sometimes worry about how that's going to come back on them. Because they have a kind of separate life to you. But if there was somebody in the playground who was massively pro-life, then they could, well, split up my child. So yeah, I suppose in that sense, yeah, I do. But as I say, I don't really think far enough ahead to actually make it work.
Well, Rachel, how about your writing life? I mean, how did that change things? Well, you don't have as much time. I mean, there it is. You're looking after other people, and that is a massive thing to adjust to. I mean, I'd written a lot of books before I had children, and I was very used to that process being pretty unlimited. But at the same time, I mean, the big change that I found was that before there was a kind of blankness out of which I had to find a book, and I never knew where it was going to be and whether I would be able to write it. And so I do remember very clearly creativity seeming more mysterious and ineluctable and inaccessible. And when I had children, the whole of life became more practical and scheduled, and that I found really helpful, strangely, because suddenly I had 6 hours, or 2 hours, or 6 minutes in which to write something, and so this sense of not quite knowing what it was going to be. I mean, it was as though my learning to be competent, which you do when you're a child, you learn to be competent in all sorts of ways, that extended to writing, so I became more competent and better at using my time, and I've enjoyed, in a way, my children are older now, and I'm sort of nervous at the idea of them leaving home and me being back in that, that sort of undefined, I don't know what will happen, something. Can you say quickly before we move on to open questions, how that has affected you?
I think what's kind of interesting about that question is that, and I'm probably going to lose like a ton of feminist points here, but the way that I look at it, I have to balance being a mom and being a wife and being a book writer and being a blog writer, and when it comes right down to it, I can't do all of those things perfectly all the time, and so I think what has actually helped me is to know that if I'm going to be a really good mom this week, I'm probably not going to be able to do a whole lot of work on the book. And then next week, I'm going to do a whole lot of work on the book, and maybe I won't be able to spend as much time with my daughter. But I think that you shouldn't feel like you suck as a person if one of those aspects is something that you're sucking at the time, but you're like kicking ass at the other 3. Be proud of those 3 and just learn how to juggle those.
No, thank you. That's good advice. I mean, a lot of this, I do think that writing, I mean, it's hard to balance any job with parenthood, but writing does seem to me to be particularly allied to your sense of self, and so you can feel a little bit rocked by that. And a lot of what we've been talking about, I think, is sort of how to strike this balance between enough self-exposure, if it is that, to strike a chord, and enough self-protection to sort of not be destroyed. But anyway, good luck. Should we open this out? I'll pass one of these mics around and then keep another so that we can have a... And perhaps when you ask a question, say if it is directed at someone in particular, who that is. So, yes, Lady Gray. Sorry. Oh.
Hi, thank you. I'm very interested in this question about blogging about your children, because this is something I do. And my eldest son, I have 3 boys, is now 16, and the other day said to me, I don't really want you to blog about me anymore, which was quite difficult. You don't think about this in the beginning. He also came downstairs and said, it's finally happened, Anna is reading your blog, and Anna is his girlfriend. So I then promptly, I said, well, the thing is, I can't make up anything as good as what happens with you guys. It's just brilliant. There's no fiction that can match this. So he said, okay, well, how about if I read it first and then you post it? So that's what we did, and I immediately blogged about it, obviously. So I would like to know what how people think about this, because I feel a bit grubby about it, and it's a bit of a moral grey area.
Yeah, who wants to answer that? We'll say that. I think children don't always like what their parents do. Part of what adolescence is for is to say, I'm different from you. you know, that's what's stressful for the child, emerging from childhood, is that they have to dislike certain things about their parents' world. And I think writing is no different in terms of work. I mean, I remember being, you know, angry with my father when I was 16 because he's a businessman. He was working in South Africa, and at the time there was apartheid in South Africa, and off he would go, and he would return with his suitcase full of precious stones and bits of ivory and these sort of strange things.
I don't really blog about my child, and so I said live on CNN that I would prefer you didn't call me a mommy blogger, just because it's weird that someone is calling me a mommy if you didn't come out of my own vagina. It's more polite. It was relatively well received, because they had completely cut me out right before I could say anything about my book, which was the whole reason why I was on there. And they were like, "Oh, okay, let's cut to someone else." So, you know, I think that yes, you do have a tendency to be dismissed, but at the same time, I think that perception is changing, and I think people are starting to understand that, you know, the hand that rocks the cradle does rock the world.
Zoe says about practice is right. You have to get used to socialising your voice, putting what's inside you out into external space. So I would say write a journal. Jenny, a tip from you, please.
I would say write for yourself, because if you write for yourself, you're always going to be happy with your results. If you're writing for someone else, you're never going to know what you're going to think. I also did want to go back really quickly to the person from the Times who asked that question. I had a really similar issue when I wrote my book. I mean, it's a memoir about my life and about poverty, and I knew that a lot of people would probably take offense to it. Every single person who was in my book, from family to in-laws to everyone, had a chance to actually read it before it came out, just to make sure that they were okay with it. And everyone was completely okay with it. And I think that's part of it, is letting people know right from the very beginning, this is what it's going to look like. And then a lot of that fear goes away. Because sometimes if you have this like, oh, well, what is your perception going to be? Is it going to be different than mine? And for the most part, my family was like, oh, well, who cares? And then it opened at like #1 on the New York Times, and then suddenly they were like, oh, wait, let's read it again. Wait, what did you say about it?
Thank you.